Dollhouse Season 2, Episode 10, The Attic, continues from where the previous episode left off, with Echo being placed into the attic. Her body is displayed in a very objectifying way to show Rossum's evil, and it is evil, but it isn't played up in a sexually attractive way to appeal to the male gaze. It's just evil. She manages to fool the censors into making it appear as though she were dead, and when the goons try to revive her, she escapes and knocks them out. The Rossum goons are both male and female equally, and Echo fights them off equally, using an equal amount of violence, and that's feminist. She frees Anthony and Priya, and they almost escape until a spontaneously materializing force field impedes their path, and Echo has to watch her friends get murdered. Yeah, it turns out the attic makes you hallucinate, and Echo's really back in her box. Meanwhile, in the dollhouse, Topher addresses the problem of the brain-dead Ballard. Alpha damaged his brain so entirely that the only way he could be fixed is if Topher were to make him inactive. Adelle tells him to do so and alludes to making him a permanent sex slave.
And we are in the market for a strapping new victor, are we not?
The fact that this scenario can come up and be treated so seriously really makes Dollhouse seem feminist to me. The characters are treated with complete respect as human beings, regardless of gender. In Dollhouse, women are treated with such respect that Adelle can be hated as this evil sexual predator in the same way as Harding, without being sexualized herself as this kind of dominatrix figure. She's back in her feminine clothing too, so it's not like she assumes masculinity. Ballard's sexualization is also interesting. In Ghost, his looks were played up for his mental boxing match, but that was done in a way typical for male protagonists, emphasizing athletic energy. That is sexualization specifically through the typical male gender role. Now in the attic, he is sexualized in the way women often are. He's treated as vulnerable to sexual exploitation simply because he seems attractive to the person in charge. We legitimately feel concern for Ballard instead of treating a sexually vulnerable man as a point of humor, as in Wedding Crashers.
I felt like Jodie Foster in The Accused last night.
When serious villain and victim roles can be either gender without distorting gender performance, then we've got something darn feminist. Anyway, Topher discusses with Ivy how the damage to Ballard's brain is so extensive that even as an active, he wouldn't be able to do simple tasks. He uses an analogy relating to a shallow understanding of American football. The usual way this would play out is having the woman be ignorant of football and the man have to explain it to her, and she making some comment about how men and their football, whatever. In this case, Ivy knows more about the subject than Topher, and she has to explain it to him. It turns into a joke about how Topher has limited understanding of popular entertainment. You know, he's just that geeky. As Ivy tries to explain, Topher is struck with inspiration and goes to fix Ballard's brain by replacing some non-essential parts.
Sarcasm. Already doesn't have that.
Adelle confronts Topher over his attack on Nolan. Earlier, when Topher hesitated to send Echo to the attic, she threatened to send him there too. Now she actually threatens to brutally murder him if he doesn't toe the line. Topher, who was once the most apathetic tool of Rossum, is now the most moral of the cast. And we really feel for him as he loses complete control over what's going on.
That woman is gonna drag us straight to hell.
Some feminists seem to think that Dollhouse is all about evil, abusive, controlling men victimizing women. Not even close. Topher turns Ballard into an active and imprints him to be himself. Ballard is furious for essentially having been turned into a slave, and he goes out to kill Adelle. Adelle is waiting for him, all badass.
Any last words?
Back in the attic, Echo replays the same scenario over and over until she figures out that she can change the scenario by not reacting to her friends' deaths. She's able to enter an abstract dream world representing snippets of nightmares for all her personalities. Suddenly, Blue Hulk shows up and starts smacking her around. She runs into Dominic, who she immediately tries to kill, but he assures her that he's not her enemy, and he helps her fight off the Blue Hulk, who's actually called Arcane. Dominic explains that after he was sent to the attic, he figured out how he could leave his nightmare and enter those of others. The The trick to leaving a nightmare is to fulfill the nightmare by doing the thing that most terrifies the occupant. He found out that there's this monster called Arcane that's been killing people, destroying each nightmare world, and he's been hunting it down on this great, bold mission. Echo lays back in the chair, the thing that terrifies her most, and disappears into the nightmare world of this Japanese Rossum employee. He has to eat dinner made from his own legs. Ew. He explains that Rossum sent him there because he discovered a huge vulnerability in their system, which piques Echo's interest, but he isn't able to explain before he's killed by Arcane. Echo and Dominic follow Arcane. Meanwhile, Priya's living in a nightmare where she makes out with Anthony, only for him to turn into an undead Nolan who then tries to rape her. At the same time, Anthony relives a scene from him fighting in Afghanistan, probably what got him the PTSD that sent him to the Dollhouse in the first place, except a bit more symbolic where he has to kill himself. This allows for a bit of reflection on general feminist criticism of Joss Whedon and his shows. Joss takes a lot of flack from feminists for putting rape into his shows. Often this is because the feminists are rape survivors themselves and they get triggered by watching the sexual assault play out on screen. I saw one feminist write something to the effect of, "Doesn't he realize how upsetting this is?" With the implication that Joss must be some evil misogynist because he could write something upsetting. I would normally counter such arguments by saying that people often want to feel uncomfortable, that the entire horror genre is based around people wanting to feel uncomfortable in a way that is ultimately safe. It's also worth noting that there are very few feminists who complain about this who don't also have a bias in favor of women. There are some actual pacifist types that oppose violence across the board, but many just are offended by the rape and utterly ignore the other violent aspects to the shows. Unless they're men punching women in the face. Without dismissing male victims of rape, it must be noted that the vast majority of rape victims are women, and that rape is the main cause of PTSD in women. Among males, however, PTSD is most likely the result of combat situations. The attic equally represents both genders' traumas, with Priya's rape nightmare scenario and Anthony's combat nightmare scenario. This can be extended to Dollhouse depictions in general, with both rape and combat. Feminists who complain about being triggered by the rape scenes, without also caring about the men who may be triggered by the combat scenes, are being very sexist themselves. Echo and Dominic find Anthony and Priya and recruit them to help defeat Arcane. There's a big fight and they all fall into the dystopian world of Epitaph 1, which is Arcane's nightmare. Arcane is actually a nerdy guy named Clyde.
Why do you call yourself Arcane?
Sounded badass.
Now why do I think this guy named Mind Whisper? Clyde describes how he's trying to take down Rossum by taking down their mainframe. The mainframe is actually like the Matrix, a network spread throughout human brains, the human brains belonging to the prisoners of the attic. And if you die in the Matrix, you die in real life. Clyde decided that killing the prisoners was a necessary evil to prevent the end of the world, after Mitt Romney is elected and everyone turns into fast zombies.
Anyone who can run, fight, make explosives out of household objects, or especially do parkour of any kind, you'll want to stick with them.
Joss Whedon's political advice not endorsed by Going Rampant.
After a gender-neutral battle with butchers, some butchers are male, some butchers are female, they get beaten up equally and equally do the beating. Clyde explains that he, along with his best friend, were the original founders of Rossum. Clyde invented imprinting technology. After first imprinting someone with an obedient version of Clyde, called Clyde 2.0, his partner turned on him and stuck him into what would become the attic. Clyde was used to figure out how the technology was likely to affect the world, and 97% of his calculated scenarios involve the end of all civilization. They discuss how to stop Rossum, but Clyde doesn't know his partner's identity. That was the first thing erased from his mind. He does know that a woman recently managed to get a glimpse of him or her, and was wiped to keep that information from getting out. Echo figures out that it's Caroline, so they need to get back to the Dollhouse to access the hard drive with her imprint. Echo decides to allow herself to die in the Matrix so she can start to die in real life, in order to trigger the scenario she saw in her nightmare. With the death trick, she's able to save Anthony and Priya, who sacrifice themselves as a leap of faith in Echo. I swear, she's Jesus! Clyde and Dominic stay in the attic to prepare to destroy the mainframe on Echo's signal. Echo then reports what she learned to Adelle, who sent her there to learn Rossum's weakness in preparation for making war on them. She actually chose to protect her charges instead of being obedient to Rossum. And she now leads everyone on a mission for freedom. Even though it's clear she's not evil, she still holds the same immense authority, just directed towards good. The band of freedom fighters also has an equal ratio of men to women. This is finished with Echo saying a cheesy line about needing Caroline.
It's time for me to meet Caroline. It's time to win her war.
To war.